when a desperate young woman begs for help. "Sir, my sick mother needs someone strong." The towering Apache warrior steps forward. But instead of offering brute strength, his answer reveals wisdom and compassion that shocks his entire tribe. In a land where power is measured by muscle, the giant Apache shows that true strength lies in sacrifice, healing and love, forever changing how the tribe views leadership and honor. AIYANA BLACKFEATHER, 23, approached the tribal council with trembling hands, her mother dying from a mysterious illness that had baffled their medicine man for weeks. The council sat in solemn silence, weighing her desperate plea against tribal customs that demanded warriors prove their worth through displays of physical dominance. Nahale, the giant Apache, rose from his position among the warriors, his 7-foot frame casting shadows across the ceremonial fire. His response would either save a life or challenge everything his people believed about strength and leadership. What ancient wisdom would he reveal that could heal both body and spirit? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn wind carried whispers of change through the Apache village, as Nahale the giant stood before the Yeast Council fire. At 7 feet tall, with shoulders broad as a canyon wall, he commanded respect through sheer physical presence alone. His massive frame had been forged through 28 years of warrior training, each muscle earned through countless battles against enemy tribes and nature's harshest challenges. The other warriors regarded him with a mixture of admiration and envy. Tekoda, lean and quick as a mountain cat, sat across the circle with arms crossed, his dark eyes measuring Nahale's every movement. Chaitan, scarred from numerous raids, nodded approvingly as the giant considered AIYANA's desperate request. These men understood strength in its most traditional form, the ability to crush enemies, to endure pain, to dominate through force of will and muscle. Nahale's war club lay beside him, a fearsome weapon inherited from his father, Chief Strong Bear, who had led their people to victory in 37 battles before falling to Comanche arrows. 5 winters passed. The massive oak handle, worn smooth by generations of Strong Bear hands, bore carved symbols representing each enemy defeated, each territory defended. It was more than a weapon. It was a legacy of violence successfully applied, a testament to the warrior's path that had protected their people since time beyond memory. But tonight, as Nahale stared at the desperate young woman before him, something stirred in his chest that had nothing to do with the warrior's rage that had carried him through so many conflicts. AIYANA's tears caught the firelight like falling stars, and her trembling voice echoed with the same desperation he had heard in his own mother's cries when fever had claimed her during his 14th winter. "My sick mother needs someone strong," she had said, her words hanging in the night air like smoke from the sacred fire. The council expected him to respond as his father would have, with promises of physical action, perhaps an offer to carry the sick woman to distant healers, or to hunt down rare herbs from dangerous territories where enemies might lurk. Instead, Nahale found himself remembering his grandmother's weathered hands as she tended wounded warriors, her gentle touch more powerful than any blade when it came to mending what was broken. Grandmother AIYANA, for whom this desperate young woman had been named, had possessed secrets that went beyond the warrior's understanding of strength. The tribal council waited in silence that stretched like a bowstring drawn too tight. Chief Iron Hawk, his father's successor, leaned forward with intense concentration. The medicine man, Running Wolf, clutched his sacred bundle with frustration evident in every line of his aged face. For weeks he had tried every traditional remedy, every herb and ritual passed down through generations, but the mysterious illness consuming Blackfeather defied all conventional healing. Nahale's reputation had been built on decisive action. When Comanche raiders had threatened their horses, he had tracked them for 3 days without sleep and returned with scalps and stolen animals. When a grizzly had wandered too close to the village children, he had faced it alone with nothing but a spear and emerged victorious after a battle that left both man and beast bloodied. but the giant standing. Yet as he studied AIYANA's face in the flickering firelight, he understood that this challenge required something different from the raw physical power that had made him legendary among his people. Her mother's illness was not an enemy that could be defeated with war club or arrows. It was a shadow that crept through the body like poison, stealing life with each passing hour, while traditional strength stood helpless to intervene. The weight of expectation pressed down upon his broad shoulders like stone. Every eye in the council circle watched him, waiting for the response that would either confirm his status as the ultimate Apache warrior or reveal some unexpected weakness that might diminish his standing among his people. But Nahal had learned long ago that true courage sometimes meant disappointing those who expected you to be what they needed, rather than what you truly were. Inside the modest dwelling where sickness held dominion, AIYANA Blackfeather lay motionless beneath layers of buffalo hide and woven blankets that could not warm the chill spreading through her weakening body. At 47, she had been the village's most skilled weaver, her fingers dancing across looms to create patterns that told stories of their people's journey through sacred lands. Now those same fingers lay pale and still, unable to grasp even the simplest object. AIYANA knelt beside her mother's sleeping form, one hand resting gently on Easter's burning forehead, while the other clutched a small turquoise stone that had been passed down through 5 generations of Blackfeather women. The healing stone, smooth as river water and blue as summer sky, had once been said to draw illness from the body, like lightning draws energy from storm clouds. Yet for all its legendary power, the turquoise remained cold and lifeless against AIYANA's palm, offering no relief to the woman who had given her life meaning. "Mother," AIYANA whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind that rattled the dwelling's hide walls. "The council meets tonight. Someone will help us. Someone must help us." Ister's eyes fluttered open, revealing the same deep brown that AIYANA had inherited, though now dulled by pain and the strange fever that came and went like an unpredictable tide. Her mother's illness had begun 3 weeks earlier, with simple fatigue, the kind that might follow a long day of weaving or gathering roots. But this exhaustion had deepened with each passing sunrise, accompanied by sweats that soaked through clothing and chills that no fire could banish. "My daughter," Easter managed, her voice like wind through dry leaves, "do not burden the warriors with an old woman's troubles." "You are not old," AIYANA protested, though she could see how the illness had aged her mother beyond her years. "And you are the strongest woman I know. You taught me to weave stories into cloth, to find medicine in mountain plants, to see beauty in every sunrise. You cannot leave me now." Easter's smile carried all the love and sadness that mothers bear when they recognize their own mortality reflected in their children's fears. She had raised AIYANA alone after her husband's death in a hunting accident 7 years past, teaching her daughter not only the traditional skills expected of Apache women, but also the deeper wisdom that connected all living things in an endless web of mutual dependence. "The turquoise," Easter whispered, noticing the stone in her daughter's hand. "Your great-grandmother told me it only works when the heart is ready to receive its medicine." AIYANA studied the stone with frustrated confusion. For generations, Blackfeather women had relied on this talisman during times of illness and crisis. Her great-grandmother had claimed it saved her during the terrible winter when half the tribe perished from disease. Her grandmother had worn it through 3 difficult births, crediting the turquoise with protecting both mother and children. Even AIYANA's own mother had touched it during her daughter's childhood fevers, and health had always returned. But now the stone felt like nothing more than polished rock, beautiful but powerless against whatever darkness consumed her mother from within. Running Wolf, their medicine man, had examined it carefully during his many visits, performing purification ceremonies and invoking the ancient prayers that should have awakened its healing properties. Nothing had changed. The stone remained cold, the prayers went unanswered, and Easter grew weaker with each passing day. "Tell me about the old medicine," AIYANA said, settling more comfortably beside her mother's bed. The healing that goes beyond stones and her. Easter's eyes sharpened slightly, as if her daughter's question had touched something vital that still burned strong despite her body's weakness. Your great-grandmother spoke of warriors who healed with their hands and hearts, rather than weapons. Men who understood that some battle required different kinds of strength. What kind of strength? The strength to sit with suffering without trying to defeat it. The strength to listen when others would act. The strength to touch what is broken with such gentleness that healing becomes possible again. AIYANA felt tears gathering in her eyes as she struggled to understand her mother's words. Such concepts seemed foreign in a world where warriors proved their worth through displays of physical dominance and courage in battle. How could gentleness be strength? How could listening heal what medicine could not touch? Outside their dwelling, the sounds of the council fire drifted through the night air. Men's voices raised in discussion, the ceremonial drumming that accompanied important tribal decisions, the crackling of flames that had witnessed generations of Apache wisdom. Chief Iron Hawk held the eagle feather staff with the reverence due to an object that had guided tribal decisions for more generations than living memory could recall. The staff's worn wooden handle bore the marks of countless hands that had gripped it during moments of crisis, its eagle feathers still magnificent despite their age, each one representing a treaty negotiated, a battle won, or a decision that had preserved their people through times of trial. The request before us tonight, Iron Hawk announced, his voice carrying the authority that came from 15 years of leadership, concerns more than one family's tragedy. How we respond will reflect our understanding of what it means to be Apache warriors in service to our people. Strong wind. The eldest council member at 73 winters shifted his position with the careful movements of a man whose bones had earned their stiffness through decades of service. His weathered face bore scars from battles fought when Iron Hawk was still learning to string a bow, and his opinion carried weight that could sway the entire council's decision. The girl asks for someone strong. Strong Wind observed, his words measured and deliberate. In my lifetime, I have seen strength take many forms. The strength to endure torture without revealing our camp's location. The strength to hunt for 3 days without food to feed hungry children. The strength to face enemies who outnumber us 10 to 1. Takoda leaned forward eagerly, his young warrior's fire evident in every gesture. At 25, he represented the new generation of Apache fighters who had learned warfare in increasingly difficult times, with white soldiers pressing from the east and Mexican forces advancing from the south. His understanding of strength was forged in blood and tested in battles where weakness meant death for entire families. This is clear, Takoda declared with the confidence of youth. The woman needs a warrior to seek medicine in dangerous places, to hunt healing herbs in enemy territory, to carry her to the shamans of distant tribes who might possess knowledge our own medicine man lacks. Running Wolf clutched his own medicine bundle more tightly, the leather pouch containing sacred objects that had failed to heal Ista despite repeated ceremonies and prayers. His 70 years had brought deep understanding of traditional healing arts, but this mysterious illness had humbled him in ways that stung his professional pride and challenged his spiritual confidence. I have tried every remedy known to our people, the medicine man admitted, his voice heavy with frustration and concern. The sickness that consumes Easter Blackfeather is unlike anything in my experience. It does not respond to purification ceremonies, healing herbs, or spiritual intervention. Perhaps, he continued reluctantly, this challenge requires abilities beyond those possessed by traditional healing. Grey Eagle, a warrior in his 40s, who had earned his name through patience and wisdom rather than reckless courage, spoke with the thoughtful deliberation that made him one of Iron Hawk's most trusted advisors. His battle experience was extensive, but tempered by years of observation that had taught him when to fight and when to seek alternative solutions. We assume that strength must be applied like a weapon, Grey Eagle said quietly. But what if this situation requires a different understanding of power? What if the healing this woman needs cannot be hunted, captured, or conquered? Chaitan shifted uncomfortably at such philosophical discussions, his scarred hands unconsciously reaching for the knife at his belt. His nature favored direct action over contemplation, and he struggled with problems that could not be solved through traditional warrior methods. Words will not heal the sick, Chaitan declared bluntly. Action brings results. Send our strongest warrior to seek solutions where our medicine man has failed. Iron Hawk studied the faces around the council fire, reading the mix of certainty and confusion that marked difficult decisions. The eagle feather staff in his hands seemed to grow heavier as he contemplated choices that would reveal what kind of people they truly were beneath their warrior reputation. The silence that followed Grey Eagle's words stretched across the council circle like morning mist, heavy with possibility and uncertainty. All eyes turned to Nahai as he rose slowly from his seated position, his massive frame unfolding with the deliberate grace of a mountain awakening from winter sleep. The war club of his father remained on the ground beside his empty place, its carved symbols catching firelight like ancient memories demanding attention. Instead of reaching for the weapon that had defined his family's legacy, Nahail's hand moved to a small leather pouch at his waist. A simple bag that none of the warriors had noticed before, unremarkable among the many tools and talismans that adorned a fighter's belt. From within this modest container, he withdrew a handful of what appeared to be ordinary seeds, their dark surfaces gleaming softly in the firelight. "My brothers," Nahail began, his deep voice carrying easily across the circle without the need for shouting or dramatic gesture. "You speak of strength as if it were a blade, to be wielded against enemies, a force to be unleashed upon problems until they submit to our will. But I have learned from watching the mountain meadows that true strength sometimes lies in the patience to plant rather than the power to destroy." Takoda's eyes narrowed with confusion and growing disapproval. "Seeds? You offer seeds to heal a dying woman? Have the years of battle addled your mind, giant?" Nahail's expression remained calm despite the younger warrior's obvious challenge. He had expected such resistance, understanding that his response would seem like weakness to men who measured valor through displays of physical dominance. Yet something deep within his chest, a certainty that felt as solid as granite beneath his feet, told him this was the path he must take. "These seeds," he continued, holding them up so the firelight illuminated their simple beauty, "were given to me by my grandmother on the day I earned my first war honors. She told me that the greatest warriors understand when to plant and when to harvest, when to tend and when to protect. I have carried them for 10 years, waiting for the moment when their medicine would be needed." Chief Iron Hawk leaned forward with intense curiosity, the eagle feather staff shifting in his grip as he struggled to understand how seeds could address AIYANA's desperate situation. His leadership experience had taught him to listen carefully before passing judgment, but Nahal's approach challenged every assumption about appropriate warrior response. "Explain this medicine," Iron Hawk commanded, his tone neutral but demanding clarity. Nahali knelt beside the sacred fire and gently placed one seed upon his palm, holding it close enough to the flames that its surface seemed to glow with inner light. "When my grandmother tended the wounded after battle, she did not fight their injuries with force. She sat with them through long nights, offering water when they thirsted, warmth when they shivered, presence when they feared death would claim them before dawn." Grey Eagle nodded slowly, recognition dawning in his weathered features. "You speak of healing through care rather than conquest. I speak of understanding that some battles cannot be won through strength of arm," Nahali replied. "Easter Blackfeather's illness is not an enemy that can be defeated with war clubs or arrows. It is a shadow that has taken root in her body, and shadows flee not from violence, but from the gentle persistence of light." Chaitan's scarred hands clenched into fists as frustration boiled over into open anger. "You speak in riddles, while a woman dies. Our people need warriors who act, not philosophers who plant gardens. And what would you have me do? Nahali asked without defensiveness, genuinely curious about Chaitan's alternative. Hunt mythical herbs in distant mountains, while Ista weakens with each passing hour. Carry her across hostile territory to shamans who may possess no greater knowledge than Running Wolf. Running Wolf himself spoke up from his position beside the medicine bundle that had failed to provide healing. The giant speaks truth. I have exhausted every remedy known to our traditions. Perhaps this illness requires medicine that lies beyond the warrior's understanding of power. Nahali scattered the remaining seeds upon the ground before the sacred fire, each one catching light like a fallen star. I offer to sit with Ista Blackfeather through whatever nights remain to her. I will tend her needs with the same devotion I once brought to battle, the same attention I once gave to tracking enemies. I will plant patience where others would harvest quick solutions. The council sat in stunned silence as they processed this revolutionary approach to strength and service. The memory came to Nahali unbidden as he sat in the council circle, watching firelight dance across skeptical faces. He was 8 winters old again, small hands struggling to master the intricate patterns his grandmother wove upon her ancient loom. The wooden frame had been crafted by his great-grandfather from mountain oak, its surface worn smooth by generations of patient work, every joint reinforced with sinew and devotion that had withstood decades of constant use. Patience, little warrior, grandmother AIYANA had whispered, her weathered fingers guiding his clumsy attempts to thread the loom properly. See how each strand must find its proper place before the pattern can emerge. Rush the work, and the cloth will be weak. Take time to understand how all things connect, and your weaving will last through many seasons. Young Nahali had been frustrated by the delicate work, his boy's energy demanding activities more suited to future warfare than the seemingly feminine art of textile creation. His father's war club leaned against the dwelling wall nearby, its carved symbols calling to him with promises of glory and conquest that seemed far more appealing than the slow, methodical process of creating cloth. Why must I learn women's work? He had complained, his small fists clenched in impatience. Father says I will be a great warrior like him. Warriors do not weave. Grandmother AIYANA's laugh had been gentle as summer rain, carrying no mockery but infinite understanding of young male pride, struggling against lessons that seemed to contradict everything he believed about his destiny. Her hands never ceased their rhythmic work as she spoke, the loom singing softly under her expert touch. Little one, she had said, the greatest warriors understand that all things are connected, like threads in a weaving. The hunter depends upon the woman who prepares his food. The fighter relies upon those who tend his wounds. The chief succeeds only when his people work together like strands in strong cloth. She had paused in her weaving to take his small hands in her own, her palms bearing the calluses of countless hours spent at the loom, her fingers stained with dyes made from mountain plants. She gathered according to ancient knowledge passed down through generations of women who understood beauty as a form of resistance against the world's harshness. One day, Grandmother AIYANA had continued, you will face a choice between the warrior's way and the healer's path. When that moment comes, remember what the loom teaches. Strength comes not from dominating other threads, but from weaving them together into something more beautiful than any single strand could create alone. The old woman had returned to her work, and young Nahali had watched in fascination as patterns emerged from what had seemed like random colored threads. Slowly, he began to understand that weaving required its own kind of skill, its own form of patience and precision that was no less demanding than warrior training. Tell me about the healing warriors, he had asked, settling beside her with new respect for the complexity of her craft. Grandmother AIYANA's eyes had grown distant as she reached into memories that predated his birth by many seasons. In the old days before the white soldiers came to our lands, some men learned that the strongest medicine comes not from forcing change, but from creating conditions where healing becomes possible. They understood that bodies, like cloth, must be mended with gentle hands and patient heart. What happened to them? War became too urgent for such subtlety, she had replied sadly. Young men forgot that some battles require different weapons than clubs and arrows. They chose the quick path of violence over the slow work of restoration. But the knowledge remains, waiting for those wise enough to remember. Young Nahali had spent many afternoons at that loom, learning to see connections between individual threads and finished patterns, understanding how patience and attention to detail could create beauty that would outlast the weapons of war. His grandmother had taught him that strength could be measured not only in the ability to destroy, but in the capacity to create, to mend, to bring harmony from chaos. Now, 20 years later, sitting before the tribal council with seeds in his palm, instead of weapons in his hands, Nahali felt the wisdom of those childhood lessons flowing through him like water, finding its proper course. The loom had taught him that some problems required different tools than those favored by traditional warriors, that healing demanded its own form of courage. The memory of his grandmother's prophecy echoed in his mind, as clearly as if she still sat beside him. One day you will face a choice between the warrior's way and the healer's path. That day had arrived, and Nahali knew with absolute certainty which path his heart demanded he take. The sage bundle crackled softly as Nahali touched flame to its tightly bound leaves, releasing spirals of purifying smoke that filled Ista's dwelling with the sacred scent that had blessed Apache ceremonies since the beginning of memory. The dried herbs had been gathered at dawn from mountain slopes where morning mist still clung to ancient stones, their silver-green leaves chosen with the same care his grandmother had taught him to apply when selecting threads for her loom. AIYANA anthemed from the shadows as this giant of a man moved through her mother's sick room with surprising gentleness, his massive hands holding the burning sage as delicately as if it were a newborn bird. Everything about his presence seemed wrong according to the expectations she had carried to the tribal council. Warriors were supposed to arrive with dramatic plans and forceful solutions, not with smoking herbs and quiet patience. "What are you doing?" she whispered, afraid to speak too loudly in case she disturbed some sacred process she did not understand. Nahali continued his slow circuit around Ista's motionless form, allowing the sage smoke to drift over her fevered body while he observed her breathing, the color of her skin, the way shadows pooled beneath her closed eyes. His attention was complete and focused, like a hunter reading tracks in difficult terrain. But there was no predatory urgency in his manner, only the calm observation of someone who understood that healing required different skills than those needed for war. "I am listening," he replied softly, settling the sage bundle in a clay bowl where it could continue burning safely. "Your mother's body is trying to tell us what kind of medicine she needs, but first I must learn her language." AIYANA felt confused and slightly frustrated by his cryptic response. Running Wolf has already examined her thoroughly. He knows her symptoms better than anyone. Nahali nodded respectfully. Running Wolf understands the traditional signs of illness, the symptoms that match known remedies, but this sickness speaks in whispers that require different ears to hear. He knelt beside Ista's sleeping form and placed one enormous hand gently on her forehead, not to check for fever, but to establish connection, to announce his presence to whatever darkness had taken residence in her body. His touch was so light it barely disturbed the thin hair that clung to her damp skin. Yet AIYANA could see immediate changes in her mother's breathing, a subtle relaxation that suggested comfort rather than alarm. "Tell me about the dreams," Nahali said quietly, his eyes never leaving Ista's face. "Dreams?" AIYANA moved closer, drawn by curiosity despite her skepticism about his methods. "Illness of this kind often brings visions that reveal the nature of what needs healing. Has your mother spoken of dreams since the sickness began?" AIYANA considered the question carefully, remembering fragments of conversations during Ista's fevered moments, when consciousness drifted between waking and sleeping, like smoke between earth and sky. "She speaks, sometimes of walking in darkness, searching for something she has lost. She calls out for her mother, though grandmother died many years ago. Nahali's expression grew thoughtful as he processed this information, his free hand reaching for a small pouch of water that had been blessed by Running Wolf during the unsuccessful healing ceremonies. He dampened a soft piece of deerskin and began gently bathing Easter's forehead and cheeks, his movements slow and deliberate, each gesture carrying the weight of ritual rather than mere practicality. "The darkness she walks is real," he said as he worked. "Sometimes the spirit becomes lost when the body is sick, wandering in places where ordinary medicine cannot reach. My grandmother taught me that healing such illness requires someone willing to sit vigil, to be present while the lost spirit finds its way home." As if responding to his words, Easter's eyes fluttered open for the first time in 2 days, unfocused but aware enough to register the presence of someone new beside her bed. Her gaze fixed on Nahali's face with the confusion of someone emerging from deep dreams, struggling to understand why a warrior sat where she expected to find only her daughter. She whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft crackling of the sage. "I am Nahali," he replied simply. "I have come to sit with you while you heal." Easter's eyes moved from his face to the burning sage, then to her daughter hovering nearby with an expression that mixed hope with bewilderment. "You are the giant. Why are you in my dwelling?" "Because strength sometimes means staying still rather than moving, watching rather than acting, being present rather than solving." His voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had made peace with choosing an unconventional path. "I am here to tend the fire that will guide your spirit home." The broken arrow lay in Takoda's palm like an accusation against everything Nahal represented. Its wooden shaft had snapped cleanly in half during the previous day's hunting expedition, the stone point still sharp but useless without the strength of properly joined wood to carry it to its target. The young warrior held the pieces together as he paced outside Easter's dwelling, his footsteps wearing a circular path in the dusty earth that spoke of endless frustration with methods that defied his understanding of proper action. 3 days, Takoda muttered to Chaitan, who leaned against a cottonwood tree with arms crossed in similar disapproval. 3 days the giant has sat in that dwelling like an old woman, burning herbs and whispering prayers while Easter Blackfeather grows weaker with each sunrise. Chaitan's scarred fingers drummed against his knife handle in a rhythm that matched his impatience with Nahal's unconventional approach. His battle experience had taught him that problems demanded immediate solutions, that hesitation in the face of crisis often meant death for those depending on warrior protection. Watching the tribe's strongest fighter, reduced to what appeared to be inactivity, violated every principle he held about masculine responsibility. "The council should never have permitted this foolishness," Chaitan growled. "While he plays medicine man, the woman dies. Her daughter weeps. The entire village questions whether our greatest warrior has lost his courage." Other voices joined their complaint as men gathered in the morning shadows cast by Easter's dwelling. Swift Hawk, barely 20 and eager to prove himself worthy of warrior status, spoke with the certainty of youth that has never faced problems that could not be solved through direct application of force. "My grandfather says real warriors act rather than contemplate. If Nahali has forgotten this lesson, perhaps it is time for younger men to remind him." Stone Bear, whose massive frame rivaled Nahali's own, nodded agreement while studying the broken arrow in Takoda's hand. "That arrow served its purpose until the wood failed. Perhaps our giant has also served his purpose until his strength failed. Warriors grow old. Strength fades. Perhaps it is time to acknowledge what we can all see." The suggestion that Nahali's legendary power might be diminishing spread through their gathering like fire through dry grass, feeding on frustrations that had been building since he had chosen seeds over weapons, patience over action, mysterious healing arts over traditional warrior responses to crisis. Running Wolf emerged from Easter's dwelling with the weary expression of a medicine man whose authority had been quietly supplanted by methods he neither understood nor approved. His sacred bundle hung heavily at his side, its failure to heal Easter a public testament to the limitations of traditional Apache medicine when faced with illnesses that defied conventional treatment. "How does she fare?" Takoda demanded, though the medicine man's dejected appearance already suggested the answer. "She wakes more often," Running Wolf admitted reluctantly. "The fever has lessened slightly, but these improvements are small, and I cannot determine their cause. The giant uses no medicines I recognize, performs no ceremonies I have learned. Yet something in that dwelling has changed since he began his vigil." Swifthawk seized upon the medicine man's uncertainty as evidence of failure. "Small improvements mean nothing if they cannot be sustained. Real healing requires real medicine, not whatever mystical nonsense the giant practices." "Perhaps," Running Wolf replied carefully, "but I have exhausted every remedy known to our people. If Nahal's methods bring improvement where mine have failed, perhaps we should observe rather than judge." The medicine man's diplomatic response only intensified the growing division within their community. Some warriors viewed Nahal's approach as evidence of wisdom beyond their understanding, while others saw it as proof that their strongest fighter had somehow lost the decisive nature that made warriors effective in crisis situations. From inside the dwelling came the sound of quiet conversation, Nahal's deep voice mixing with AIYANA's lighter tones and occasional responses from Ista herself. The fact that the sick woman was conscious enough for extended dialogue represented more progress than Running Wolf had achieved through weeks of traditional healing attempts, yet this success only deepened the mystery surrounding the giant's methods. "Listen to them," Chaitan said with disgust. "Warriors should be hunting solutions, not sitting around talking like gossiping women." Takoda clutched the broken arrow more tightly, its sharp edges cutting into his palm as frustration transformed into the kind of anger that demanded action. "Perhaps it is time someone reminded our giant what true strength looks like. If he has forgotten the warrior's way, perhaps a demonstration will restore his memory." The broken arrow in his hand seemed to symbolize everything that was wrong with Nahali's gentle approach. Beautiful in theory, but useless when real problems demanded real solutions. The crystal-clear water bubbled up from deep within the mountain stone, forming a natural spring that had sustained Apache life for countless generations. Nahali knelt beside the sacred pool with cupped hands, gathering the pure liquid that seemed to capture and reflect light like liquid diamonds. The spring had always been considered blessed by their people, its water sought after during times of ceremony and healing, though few understood why this particular source possessed power that ordinary streams lacked. "My grandmother told me this water remembers the prayers of all who have drunk from it," Nahali explained to AIYANA as they walked back toward her mother's dwelling, the precious spring water sloshing gently in a gourd container. "Each person who has sought healing here has left something of their hope in these waters." AIYANA watched his careful steps, noting how he moved as if the water were more valuable than gold, protecting it from any spillage that might waste even a single drop. 6 days had passed since he began his vigil with her mother, and she found herself studying this warrior with growing fascination and confusion. Everything about him contradicted her, ending of how powerful men behaved. "How can water remember?" she asked, genuinely curious about concepts that challenged her practical view of the world. "How can an arrow remember the direction the hunter intended?" Nahal replied with a gentle smile. "How can a horse remember the path home through darkness? Some things carry memories in ways we do not fully understand." Inside the dwelling they found Easter sitting upright for the first time in 2 weeks, her back supported by buffalo hide cushions that Nahali had arranged with precise care for her comfort. Her eyes, while still showing the effects of prolonged illness, held a clarity that had been absent since the mysterious sickness began its assault on her body. "Daughter," Easter said, her voice stronger than it had been in days, "bring me the loom. My hands remember their work, and my heart remembers why I learned to weave." AIYANA's eyes filled with tears of relief and amazement as she retrieved her mother's weaving frame, the familiar wooden structure that had been silent and unused since the illness began. Watching Easter's fingers move across the threads with returning skill felt like witnessing the resurrection of hope itself. Nahali approached with the spring water, kneeling beside Easter's bed with the same reverence he had shown throughout his vigil. "Drink slowly," he advised, supporting the gourd while she sipped the crystal-clear liquid. "Let it carry healing to every part of your body that needs restoration." As Easter drank, a remarkable transformation became visible to all who watched. Color returned to her cheeks like sunrise, spreading across valley walls. Her breathing deepened and steadied, losing the labored quality that had marked each day of her illness. Most remarkably, her eyes began to shine with the inner light that her daughter remembered from healthier times. "The darkness is lifting," Easter whispered after finishing the water. "I can feel my spirit returning from the lost places where it has wandered." Outside the dwelling, word of Easter's dramatic improvement spread through the village like wildfire across dry grass. Warriors who had criticized Nahial's methods found themselves confronting evidence that his gentle approach had accomplished what traditional medicine could not achieve. The mystery deepened their discomfort even as they witnessed its undeniable results. Running Wolf arrived to examine his patient and found changes that challenged everything he thought he understood about healing. Easter's fever had broken completely. Her skin had regained healthy warmth without the burning heat that had consumed her for weeks. Most importantly, she demonstrated awareness and energy that suggested genuine recovery rather than temporary improvement. "What medicine did you use?" the traditional healer asked Nahal, with a mixture of professional curiosity and wounded pride. "Presence," Nahal replied simply. "Patience. The understanding that some illnesses come from spiritual separation rather than physical causes. Your medicines failed because they treated the body while the spirit remained lost in darkness." AIYANA watched this exchange between healers, representing different approaches to the same problem, beginning to understand that her mother's recovery had implications beyond their family's private tragedy. Nahial's success challenged fundamental assumptions about strength, healing, and the proper role of warriors in serving their community's needs. "Teach me," she said suddenly, the words emerging from some deep place within her heart, before her mind could consider their implications. "Teach me this healing that goes beyond herbs and ceremonies." Nahal studied her face with the same careful attention he had given her mother's symptoms, reading her sincerity and recognizing the spark of understanding that marked someone ready to learn wisdom that could not be forced or faked. "First," he said, offering her the empty gourd that had contained the spring water, "you must learn to see clearly. Healing begins with truly observing what needs to be healed." The wooden comb emerged from mountain ash, with the patience of seasons, each tooth carved with meticulous care during long evenings when Nahal's hands needed occupation while his mind processed the wonder of Easter's healing. The grain of the wood flowed like water frozen in time, smooth beneath his calloused fingers as he shaped it into something beautiful enough to hold AIYANA's dark hair without catching or pulling the silken strand. He had begun the carving on the fourth night of his vigil, working by firelight while Easter slept, and AIYANA dozed fitfully in the corner of the dwelling. Something about the repetitive motion of knife against wood had calmed his spirit during the uncertain hours when her mother's recovery remained doubtful, the familiar ritual of creation helping him maintain the inner peace necessary for healing work. "You made this for me?" AIYANA asked, accepting the finished comb with hands that trembled slightly as she traced its elegant curves. No man had ever crafted anything specifically for her use, and the intimacy of such a personal gift spoke of intentions that went beyond the formal politeness expected between unmarried tribal members. "I made it because your hair deserves better than the broken combs you have been using," Nahal replied simply, though his eyes carried warmth that suggested deeper motivations than mere practicality. Beautiful things should be cared for with tools that honor their beauty. They sat together outside Easter's dwelling in the soft light of early evening, her mother sleeping peacefully inside while recovery continued its steady progress toward complete health. 9 days had passed since Nahaya began his vigil, and the transformation in both patient and healer had become obvious to anyone who cared to observe. AIYANA drew the comb through her hair with slow, deliberate strokes, marveling at how smoothly the carved teeth moved through strands that had been tangled from days of worry and insufficient attention to personal grooming. The wood felt warm against her scalp, as if it had absorbed something of the maker's careful attention during its creation. "Why did you really choose to help my mother?" she asked, her voice soft enough that their conversation would not carry to the curious ears she knew were listening from neighboring dwellings. "You could have chosen any response to my plea. You could have sent others to seek distant medicine, or rare. Instead, you chose to sit vigil like a woman tending her family." Nahali considered her question with the same thoughtful attention he brought to all aspects of healing work, understanding that honesty between them had become as necessary as the spring water that had helped restore Ishtar's strength. Their relationship had developed beyond the formal boundaries that typically governed interactions between unmarried tribal members, shaped by shared nights of worry and wonder over her mother's recovery. "Because," he said finally, "I recognized something in your plea that reminded me of my own prayers when my mother lay dying. I was 14, too young to help in any meaningful way, forced to watch helplessly while fever consumed the woman who had given me life. I swore then that if I ever gained the power to ease such suffering, I would not hesitate to use it." AIYANA paused in her combing, struck by the vulnerability in his admission. Warriors rarely spoke of helplessness or failure, preferring to emphasize their victories and strength rather than moments when they had proven inadequate to the challenges they faced. "Did your mother recover?" "No," Nahali replied simply. "She died despite everything our medicine man attempted, but her death taught me that some forms of strength are more valuable than the ability to defeat enemies in battle. The strength to remain present during suffering, the strength to offer comfort when cure is impossible, the strength to honor life even when death approaches." The wooden comb in AIYANA's hands seemed to carry new meaning as she understood the experiences that had shaped the man who created it. This was not merely a courting gift, but a token of someone who understood loss intimately enough to recognize the value of beauty preserved against life's inevitable sorrows. "I have watched you these past days," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The way you tend my mother's needs without impatience, the way you speak to her as if she were a person rather than just a problem to be solved. I have never seen such gentleness from someone so powerful. Power without gentleness is merely violence." Nahali replied, "And violence rarely heals what truly needs healing." As darkness settled over their village, they sat together in companionable silence, the carved comb resting in AIYANA's lap, like a promise of care that extended beyond the immediate crisis that had brought them together. The ceremonial war paint gleamed wet and crimson across Takoda's sharp cheekbones as he strode through the village center with the deliberate swagger of a warrior preparing for battle. Red ochre mixed with bear grease created the Thijon patterns that had adorned Apache fighters for generations, lightning bolts across his forehead to summon speed, handprints on his chest to mark each enemy defeated, serpentine lines down his arms to represent the striking power of a warrior in his prime. "Enough!" Takoda's voice carried across the morning air with the authority of someone who had finally reached the limits of patience and diplomacy. 10 days our greatest warrior has played nurse to one sick woman, while our people question whether he has forgotten what it means to be Apache. A crowd gathered quickly around the painted warrior, drawn by the spectacle of someone boldly challenging Nahali's authority in such a public forum. Warriors emerged from their dwellings with the eager anticipation that always accompanied potential conflict between strong men. Women paused in their daily work to observe drama that might reshape their community's leadership structure. Chaitan appeared at Takoda's side, his own face painted with the black and white patterns that marked veteran fighters who had proven themselves in multiple battles. His scarred hands rested on his weapons with the easy confidence of someone prepared to support his allies' challenge through force if necessary. "The giant has disgraced our warrior tradition," Chaitan declared, his voice carrying the weight of years spent defending Apache territory against enemies who respected only strength. "While he sits whispering healing songs, our enemies grow bold. While he tends one woman's illness, other families suffer without protection." Swift Hawk and Stone Bear joined the painted warriors, their faces decorated with war colors that transformed them from individual men into symbols of traditional Apache power. The sight of multiple fighters displaying ceremonial paint suggested a coordinated challenge rather than spontaneous confrontation. Nahali emerged from Ita's dwelling at the sound of raised voices, his appearance a stark contrast to the war-painted men who faced him. His massive frame carried no weapons, bore no ceremonial decorations, showed no signs of preparation for the kind of physical confrontation that his challengers clearly intended to provoke. "You paint yourselves for war, my brothers," Nahali observed calmly, studying the elaborate designs that covered his accusers' faces and bodies. "But I see no enemies here, requiring such preparation." Takoda's eyes blazed with the fervor of someone who had spent days building anger into righteous fury. "The enemy is the weakness that has infected our tribe's strongest warrior. The enemy is the confusion that makes our people question whether strength lies in action or inaction." "And what action would you have me take?" Nahali asked, without defensiveness, genuinely curious about what his critics believed he should have done differently. "Hunt the medicine that could have healed the woman quickly instead of sitting beside her bed like a devoted dog." Stone Bear answered, his massive fists clenched in demonstration of the kind of strength he believed the situation had required. "Carry her to distant healers who might possess knowledge our own medicine man lacks," Swift Hawk added, his young warrior's enthusiasm evident in every gesture. "Lead a war party to capture enemy shamans who could be forced to share their healing secrets." Chaitan contributed, his battle experience providing increasingly violent solutions to what he viewed as a problem requiring warrior action. Nahali listened to each suggestion with respectful attention, understanding that his critics spoke from genuine concern for their people's welfare, even if their proposed solutions reflected a limited understanding of what Ista's illness had actually required. "And if those actions had failed," he asked quietly, "if the distant healers possessed no greater knowledge than Running Wolf, if enemy shamans knew nothing of this particular sickness, if the woman died while warriors hunted solutions in far places." Takoda's war paint seemed to intensify his natural aggression as he stepped closer to Nahali, with the threatening posture of someone prepared to settle disagreements through combat. "Then at least we would have acted like Apache warriors instead of Apache women." The insult hung in the air like smoke from a signal fire, designed to provoke the kind of violent response that would restore what Takoda viewed as proper order to their community. Every warrior present understood that questioning another man's courage demanded either retraction or physical satisfaction according to their ancient codes of honor. Nahali studied the painted faces surrounding him, reading the expectation and hunger for traditional conflict resolution that would prove strength through dominance rather than demonstration of alternative approaches to serving their people's needs. The sacred fire's ember glowed like a tiny sun in the palm of Nahali's hand, its heat radiating through his calloused skin without causing pain to flesh that had learned to handle dangerous things with proper respect. The flame had burned continuously in the center of their village for as long as tribal memory could recall, tended by generations of Apache who understood that some fires must never be allowed to die if their people were to survive the long darkness of winter and war. "You speak of strength as if it were a contest to be won," Nahali said, his deep voice carrying easily across the crowd that had gathered to witness this confrontation between traditional and revolutionary approaches to Apache manhood. "But true strength is measured not by what a warrior can defeat, but by what he can preserve." Takoda's war-painted face twisted with frustration and growing anger as Nahali refused to respond to insults with the kind of physical aggression that would have settled their dispute, according to ancient customs. The younger warrior had prepared for battle, painted himself for combat, gathered allies for support, only to find his opponent unwilling to engage in the traditional tests of strength that determined leadership among Apache men. "Preserve," Takoda spat, his hand moving instinctively to the war club at his side. "You have preserved one sick woman while allowing our warrior traditions to grow weak. You have preserved your own comfort while our enemies laugh at Apache softness." Chief Iron Hawk stepped forward with the eagle feather staff that symbolized his authority to maintain order during tribal disputes, his weathered face grave with concern about divisions that threatened to split their community into opposing factions. As leader, his responsibility included preventing conflicts that might weaken their people when unity was essential for survival. "Enough words," Iron Hawk declared, his voice carrying the weight of 15 years spent making decisions that affected every member of their tribe. "This disagreement requires resolution before it poisons our community further. Takoda, you challenge Nahali's methods and authority. What satisfaction do you demand?" "Combat," Takoda replied immediately, his young warrior's fire demanding the kind of direct confrontation that would prove his accusations through physical dominance. "Let strength speak where words have failed. Let the strongest man lead, as our fathers intended." Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd as they anticipated the kind of spectacular battle that would become legend regardless of its outcome. Nahali's massive frame and legendary prowess promised a contest worthy of stories told around future fires, while Takoda's speed and determination suggested he might surprise those who dismissed him as merely an ambitious youth challenging his betters. But Nahali raised the sacred ember higher, its light casting dancing shadows across faces that expected violence and found something entirely different instead. "I propose a different test," he said calmly. "Not combat between warriors, but service to our people. Let us see whose approach better serves Apache needs." Confusion replaced anticipation as the crowd struggled to understand what kind of contest could replace the traditional combat that would have settled such disputes since the beginning of their people's memory. Even Chief Iron Hawk seemed uncertain about alternatives to physical confrontation when honor and leadership had been questioned so publicly. "What service?" Iron Hawk asked carefully. Nahali gestured toward the sacred fire from which he had taken the ember, its flames representing the continuous presence of Apache spirit that connected past, present, and future generations in an unbroken chain of survival and identity. "Our people face many challenges beyond Easter's illness. Let Takoda choose any problem our tribe confronts, any need our community struggles to meet. We will each approach that challenge according to our understanding of strength. The results will speak for themselves." Takoda's war paint gleamed in the firelight as he considered this unexpected proposition, his warrior's mind struggling to adapt tactics designed for physical combat to whatever spiritual contest Nahal was proposing. But his pride and public commitment to challenging the giant's authority made retreat impossible, even if the battlefield had shifted to unfamiliar ground. "The children," Takoda said finally, seizing upon an issue that would demonstrate the value of traditional warrior training. "Many of our young men lack the skills needed to become proper Apache fighters. They grow soft from too much comfort, too little challenge. Real warriors would teach them through hardship and discipline." "Agreed," Nahali replied simply, the sacred ember still glowing in his palm like a promise of illumination that would reveal truth hidden beneath assumptions about strength and service. Grey Eagle stepped forward to witness their agreement, his weathered face thoughtful as he contemplated this revolutionary approach to resolving disputes that might preserve unity while determining whose vision better served their people's future. The ancient healing herbs filled the mountain cave with fragrances that seemed to awaken memories older than conscious thought, their dried leaves and roots representing knowledge that had been gathered across generations of Apache healers who understood that some medicines work through spirit rather than body alone. Nahale knelt among the carefully preserved plants, his massive hands gentle as he selected combinations that his grandmother's teachings had imprinted upon his memory like sacred songs passed down through bloodline, rather than formal instruction. "These have been here since my grandmother's time," he explained to the small group of tribal children who had gathered to watch his unusual approach to warrior training. "She taught me that true medicine begins with understanding what each plant offers, not just how to use it when sickness comes." Little Wolf, barely 8 years old but already showing signs of the restless energy that marked future warriors, stepped closer to examine the mysterious herbs with the fearless curiosity that adults often lost through years of learning what should frighten them. His small fingers reached toward a bundle of silver-green leaves before stopping at Nahale's gentle gesture. "First, we learn to see," Nahale said, settling into the patient teaching mode that came naturally despite his lack of formal experience instructing children. "What do you notice about this plant that makes it different from ordinary weeds?" Young Dancing Bird, 9 years old, and already showing the sharp intelligence that might make her a medicine woman if she chose that path, studied the herb with the intense concentration she brought to all learning opportunities. "The leaves are soft, like and they smell like the smoke from our sacred fires." "Very good. This is white sage, and it grows only in places where the spirits gather to watch over our people. Touch it gently and it will share its medicine with you." The children took turns examining the herb under Nahale's patient guidance, their initial excitement gradually giving way to the kind of focused attention that marked genuine learning rather than mere entertainment. Unlike traditional warrior training that emphasized physical challenges and competitive achievement, this approach encouraged cooperation and careful observation. Meanwhile, from the valley below, sounds of Takoda's very different training methods drifted up through the mountain air. Shouts of command, the clash of wooden practice weapons, the rhythmic chanting that accompanied endurance exercises designed to build strength through deliberate hardship. His approach followed traditional patterns that had produced Apache warriors for countless generations. "Why do we need to learn about plants?" asked Running Deer, 10 years old and already showing the kind of questioning nature that could become either wisdom or trouble depending on how it was channeled. "My father says warriors fight with weapons, not her." Nahale lifted a small root that looked unremarkable to untrained eyes, but carried within its fibers the power to ease pain that even the strongest warrior might one day need to endure. "When you are injured far from home, with no medicine man to tend your wounds, this knowledge could save your life. When your children are sick and you must choose between plants that heal and plants that harm, this wisdom becomes more valuable than any weapon." He demonstrated how to prepare a simple healing tea, his large hands moving with surprising delicacy as he ground dried roots into powder and mixed them with spring water heated over a small fire. The children watched with fascination as ordinary-looking plants transformed into medicine that filled their cave classroom with the scent of hope and healing. "But we also learn these things," Nahale continued, producing a practice bow sized for young hands, "because a true warrior must be complete, strong enough to fight when fighting is necessary, wise enough to heal when healing is needed, patient enough to know the difference between the two." As afternoon shadows lengthened across the mountainside, other children began climbing toward their cave, drawn by curiosity about the giant's unusual teaching methods. Word had spread through the village that Nahale was offering warrior training, unlike anything their people had seen before, combining traditional skills with knowledge that most men considered beneath their attention. Little Hawk, 11 and already taller than most boys his age, arrived with skepticism written clearly across his young face. "My cousin says you teach warriors to act like women. gathering plants instead of practicing with weapons. Nahale studied the boy's challenging expression with the same patient attention he gave to all forms of resistance, understanding that some lessons required demonstration rather than explanation. Without rising from his seated position, he reached for a stone the size of a child's fist and threw it with casual accuracy toward a target tree, 50 paces distant, striking the exact center of a knot in the bark, with enough force to send splinters flying. "What did you see?" he asked, quietly. The children stared in amazement at the distant tree, then back at Nahale's calm face, beginning to understand that gentleness and strength might not be the opposing forces they had always assumed. The ceremonial robe flowed like captured moonlight across Chief Iron Hawk's weathered hands as he held it up to catch the evening firelight, its intricate beadwork telling stories of transformation that would be read by Apache's eyes for generations to come. Unlike traditional war regalia that celebrated victories through symbols of conquest and domination, this garment depicted the journey from conflict to healing, from separation to unity, from the warrior's path to the healer's wisdom. Grandmother Willow, the tribe's eldest woman at 84 winters, had led the creation of this remarkable robe during the 2 weeks since Nahale's teaching methods had begun showing results that even his harshest critics could not ignore. Her arthritic fingers had guided younger women through the intricate beadwork that represented a new understanding of Apache leadership. "See here," Grandmother Willow said, pointing to sections of the robe where traditional lightning bolt patterns had been interwoven with flowing water designs. "This shows how the warrior's striking power can become the healer's gentle flow. Same strength, different direction." AIYANA worked beside the elder women, her own skills with needle and thread contributing to the garment that would honor the man who had saved her mother's life and opened her own heart to possibilities she had never imagined. Each bead she placed carried memories of watching Nahale transform from feared giant into gentle healer, without losing any of the strength that made him legendary. The blue sections represent the sacred spring water that restored Ista's health, explained Morning Star, a woman of 40 years whose own daughter had benefited from Nahale's teaching methods. The green patterns show the healing herbs he taught our children to recognize. The red tells of the sacred fire that witnessed his challenge to traditional ways. As word spread through the village about the ceremonial robe being crafted in Nahale's honor, tribal members began contributing their own interpretations of what his transformation had meant to their community. Stonecutter, a man who had initially supported Takoda's challenge, brought carefully carved bone beads that depicted the integration of war and peace. "I was wrong to think gentleness meant weakness," Stonecutter admitted as he offered his contribution to the growing artwork. "When my son came home from Nahale's teaching with knowledge of both fighting and healing, I understood that he had become more complete as a warrior, not less." The robe's creation had become a community project that brought together people who had been divided by the conflict between traditional and revolutionary approaches to Apache identity. Women who rarely agreed on anything found common ground in honoring a man who had proven that strength could take many forms. Even some of Takoda's former supporters had begun contributing to the ceremonial garment, their change of heart prompted by witnessing results that spoke louder than their previous prejudices. Swift Hawk, whose initial skepticism had been vocal and harsh, brought eagle feathers that represented his growing respect for alternative definitions of courage. "The giant showed me that true bravery sometimes means refusing to fight rather than seeking battle," Swift Hawk said as he handed over the precious feathers. "When he would not respond to Takoda's challenge with violence, I thought him weak. Now I see that it required greater strength to maintain peace while defending his principles." Chief Iron Hawk studied the nearly completed robe with the satisfaction of a leader who had witnessed his people grow beyond their previous limitations without losing their essential identity. The garment represented more than personal honor for one warrior. It symbolized their tribe's evolution toward a more complete understanding of what it meant to be Apache in changing times. "This robe will be worn during ceremonies that celebrate both war and peace," he announced to the gathered women. It will remind future generations that true leaders must be prepared for all aspects of serving their people's needs. Running Wolf approached the circle of working women with the humble expression of someone who had learned difficult lessons about the limitations of traditional knowledge. His medicine bundle still hung at his side, but his attitude toward healing had been transformed by watching Nahali succeed where conventional methods had failed. "I request permission to contribute sacred herbs to this robe," he said formally. "The plants that heal bodies and the ones that heal spirits. Let this garment carry medicine for all who see it." As the sun set behind distant mountains, the women continued their work by firelight, each stitch representing their community's journey from division to unity, from conflict to understanding. The ceremonial robe grew more beautiful with each contribution, its evolving design reflecting the transformation of their entire tribe. Nahali himself remained unaware of the honor being prepared for him, his attention focused on teaching children and tending to tribal members who sought his guidance about problems that required both strength and wisdom to resolve. The wedding blanket stretched across the ground like a map of unity, its intricate patterns weaving together threads contributed by every family in their Apache community. Unlike traditional wedding gifts that came from immediate relatives, this extraordinary blanket had been created through the combined efforts of women who had rarely cooperated on projects before. Nahali's transformation had taught them new ways to think about strength and collaboration. As sat at the center of the women's circle, her health fully restored and her fingers once again nimble with needle and thread, as she added the final touches to the blanket that would cover her daughter during the wedding ceremony. The mysterious illness that had nearly claimed her life seemed like a distant memory now, though she carried within her heart profound gratitude for the man who had chosen healing over conquest when her survival had depended on revolutionary approaches to Apache medicine. "Each pattern tells part of your story," Esther explained to AIYANA, her voice strong and clear as she pointed to sections of the blanket that depicted the journey from desperation to hope, from traditional expectations to transformative love. "See here where the dark threads represent the illness that brought Nahali into our lives. And here where the golden ones show the healing that emerged from his gentle strength." AIYANA traced the patterns with fingertips that trembled slightly as she contemplated the ceremony that would join her life to the man who had revolutionized their entire community's understanding of what it meant to be strong. Her relationship with Nahali had developed beyond romance into partnership that represented the marriage of traditional Apache values with wisdom that transcended conventional warrior culture. Laughing Water, a woman of 50 years, whose own marriage had endured through decades of hardship and joy, contributed threads dyed with berries she had gathered from mountain slopes where eagles nested. These purple threads represent the loyalty that grows between hearts that have shared both sorrow and celebration. Your love was forged in crisis, so it will endure through whatever difficulties the future may bring. The wedding preparations had become community celebration that transcended the usual family obligations, drawing participation from tribal members who recognized that this union symbolized their entire people's evolution toward more complete understanding of Apache identity. Even former critics like Shaitan had contributed materials to the blanket, their change of heart reflecting the broader transformation that Nahali's example had inspired. Grandmother Willow supervised the blanket's completion with the authority of someone who had witnessed many marriages and understood which unions possessed the strength to survive the inevitable challenges that tested all partnerships. Her weathered hands guided younger women through techniques that ensured the blanket would remain beautiful and functional through decades of use. A wedding blanket must be strong enough to warm a family through winter storms, but soft enough to comfort children during illness, she instructed, her voice carrying the wisdom of 8 decades spent observing what made marriages succeed or fail. Like the love it represents, it must combine strength with tenderness. As afternoon shadows lengthened across their working circle, men began arriving to witness the blanket's completion and offer their own contributions to the ceremony that would celebrate the union of their community's most powerful warrior with the woman whose desperate plea had revealed his capacity for revolutionary gentleness. Chief Iron Hawk approached carrying the eagle feather staff that would be used to bless their marriage, his expression reflecting satisfaction with developments that had strengthened their tribe rather than dividing it as he had feared when the original conflict began. "This wedding represents more than the joining of two hearts," he announced to the assembled community. "It celebrates our people's discovery that strength can take many forms without losing its essential power to protect what we hold most sacred." Running Wolf brought sacred herbs that would bless their union with the approval of spirits that governed both war and peace. His medicine bundle no longer a symbol of failed healing, but a representation of traditional wisdom, expanded through revolutionary understanding. His presence at the ceremony marked his acceptance of Nahale's methods as legitimate additions to Apache healing arts. Even Takoda appeared at the edge of the gathering, his war paint replaced by ceremonial dress that acknowledged defeat while maintaining dignity. His challenge to Nahale's authority had been answered not through combat, but through demonstration of results that spoke more powerfully than any physical contest could have achieved. As the sun began its descent toward distant mountains, the completed wedding blanket lay before them like a testament to community cooperation that had emerged from initial division. Its patterns told the story of transformation that had touched every member of their tribe, reminding all who saw it that true strength often required the courage to change rather than the stubbornness to remain the same. Tomorrow would bring the ceremony that would join Nahale and AIYANA in marriage, but tonight belonged to celebration of the community that had learned to weave diverse threads into something more beautiful than any individual contribution could have created alone. The child's practice bow felt surprisingly substantial in Little Wolf's small hands as he drew back the sinew string with careful attention to the stance Nahale had taught him during weeks of patient instruction. Beside the miniature weapon lay bundles of healing herbs that the 8-year-old had learned to identify and gather according to ancient Apache knowledge that few adults possessed anymore. "Remember," Nahale said quietly, kneeling beside his younger student in the mountain meadow where their lessons took place each morning, "the bow teaches you focus and patience. The herbs teach you compassion and wisdom. A complete warrior needs both." 6 months had passed since his marriage to AIYANA, and their union had become a symbol of the transformation that continued spreading through their community like ripples from a stone dropped into still water. His teaching methods had evolved during that time, incorporating traditional warrior skills with healing knowledge that created a new generation of Apache youth who understood strength as something more complex than simple physical dominance. Little Hawk, now 12 and showing remarkable progress in both combat techniques and healing arts, demonstrated the balanced approach that had become the hallmark of Nahale's instruction. His practice arrows found their targets with increasing accuracy, while his knowledge of medicinal plants exceeded that of many adult tribal members. "Watch how he breathes before releasing the arrow," Nahale instructed the younger children who gathered to observe their older classmates' demonstration. The same calm focus that makes him accurate with weapons also helps him choose the right herbs when someone needs healing. Dancing Bird had become particularly skilled at the integration of seemingly opposing disciplines, her 9-year-old mind grasping connections that some adults still struggled to understand. She could track wounded animals through difficult terrain, but she also knew which plants would ease their pain if capture proved unnecessary for tribal survival. "My grandmother says I'm learning to think like both hunter and healer," Dancing Bird explained to Running Deer, who at 10 years old was beginning to show the leadership qualities that might one day make him a chief. "It's like seeing the world through different eyes at the same time." The children's education had attracted attention from neighboring tribes, who sent emissaries to observe teaching methods that produced young people with unprecedented combinations of traditional and revolutionary skill. Word of Nahale's approach had spread beyond their immediate community, carrying implications for how Apache culture might evolve while maintaining essential identity. Gray Hawk, a visiting chief from a tribe 2 days' journey to the east, watched the children's lessons with the intense concentration of someone evaluating innovations that might benefit his own people. His weathered face showed respect for results that challenged his assumptions about proper warrior training. These children possess skills I have never seen combined in one person, Grey Hawk admitted to Chief Iron Hawk during their formal discussions about educational methods. They shoot arrows with the accuracy of experienced hunters, but they also demonstrate healing knowledge that rivals our medicine women. The practice bow in Little Wolf's hands represented more than childhood training equipment. It symbolized the evolution of Apache identity toward integration, rather than separation of traditionally distinct roles. Young warriors no longer chose between being fighters or healers, but learned to embody both capabilities according to whatever circumstances demanded. AIYANA approached the training ground carrying water gourds and dried meat for the children, her pregnancy beginning to show in the gentle curve beneath her traditional dress. Her condition had become another source of community celebration, representing hope for future generations who would grow up understanding strength in ways their grandparents could never have imagined. "How are today's lessons progressing?" she asked Nahiel, settling beside him on the soft grass where mountain flowers bloomed in defiance of autumn's approaching chill. "They learn quickly because they see no contradiction between gentleness and power," Nahiel replied, watching Little Wolf successfully hit a target that would have challenged warriors twice his age. "Their minds are not burdened by the assumptions that made our generation struggle to accept new definitions of strength." As afternoon shadows lengthened across their mountain classroom, the children demonstrated skills that would have seemed impossible before Nahiel's transformation had shown their community that traditional boundaries between warrior and healer roles could be transcended without losing essential Apache identity. The small practice bow and healing herbs resting side by side in the grass spoke of revolution that had become evolution change, that had strengthened rather than weakened their people's connection to ancestral wisdom while preparing them for challenges that would require both ancient knowledge and innovative thinking. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new integration of old and new ways, new evidence that the strongest cultures were those flexible enough to grow while maintaining roots deep enough to provide stability during times of change. The treaty scroll lay unrolled across the council fire's light, its buffalo hide surface marked with symbols that represented the first negotiated peace agreement their Apache tribe had achieved in 2 generations of constant warfare. Unlike previous attempts at diplomacy that had failed due to mutual distrust and cultural misunderstanding, this document reflected a new approach to conflict resolution that emphasized shared interests rather than competing demands for territorial dominance. Colonel James Harrison, 53, sat across the fire from Chief Iron Hawk with the cautious respect of a military officer who had expected to conduct negotiations through superior firepower rather than peaceful dialogue. His blue uniform bore the dust of hard travel from the nearest army post, and his weathered face showed surprise at finding Apache leaders willing to discuss alternatives to the endless cycle of raid and retaliation that had defined relations between their peoples. "Your terms unexpected," Colonel Harrison admitted, studying the treaty provisions that Nahiel had helped craft during weeks of careful consideration about how strength could be demonstrated through wisdom rather than warfare. "Most tribes demand payment in horses and weapons. You ask for medical supplies and farming equipment." Chief Iron Hawk glanced toward Nahiel, whose presence at the negotiations had been questioned by some tribal members who still believed that warriors should solve problems through combat rather than conversation. But the giant's reputation for revolutionary thinking had proven valuable in imagining solutions that traditional Apache diplomacy had never considered. "Our people have learned that true strength lies in the ability to preserve life rather than destroy it," Iron Hawk explained, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed the transformation of his entire community's understanding of power and leadership. "These supplies will help us feed our children and heal our sick. Such things serve us better than weapons that bring only temporary advantage." The negotiations had been preceded by an incident that demonstrated the practical value of Nahiel's teaching method. 3 days earlier, a scouting party of soldiers had been attacked by a mountain lion while establishing their camp. Traditional Apache response would have involved either ignoring their enemy's misfortune or possibly attacking while they were weakened by injury and confusion. Instead, Little Hawk and Dancing Bird, now 13 and 11 respectively, had approached the soldiers' camp under a flag of truce, carrying healing herbs and offering medical assistance according to the principles they had learned from watching Nahali choose compassion over conquest when faced with suffering that transcended tribal boundaries. Those children saved Sergeant Miller's life. Colonel Harrison continued, his military bearing softened by memory of Apache youth, demonstrating mercy toward enemies who had been prepared to fight rather than heal. Their knowledge of mountain medicine exceeded anything our field surgeon could provide. The colonel's aide, Lieutenant Thomas Wright, had been present during the mountain lion attack and witnessed firsthand the revolutionary approach to enemy relations that Nahali's teaching had inspired in the younger generation. His report to superior officers had emphasized the strategic advantages of peaceful cooperation with tribes that demonstrated such unusual combinations of traditional skills and innovative thinking. The treaty benefits both our peoples, Nahali observed, his deep voice carrying across the fire toward men who represented a government that had rarely shown interest in mutually beneficial arrangements with indigenous populations. Your army gains reliable allies who know this territory better than any maps can show. Our tribe gains access to resources that will help us survive changing times without losing our essential identity. The document itself reflected months of careful consideration about how former enemies might transform conflict into cooperation without either side surrendering principles that defined their respective cultures. Provisions for trade, mutual defense, and shared use of certain territories had been crafted with attention to long-term sustainability rather than immediate advantage. Running Wolf had contributed traditional blessing ceremonies that incorporated both Apache and Christian elements, recognizing that successful peace required spiritual as well as political foundation. His medicine bundle now contains symbols from both traditions, representing his own evolution toward understanding that wisdom could emerge from unexpected sources. As evening shadows lengthened across their council fire, the treaty signing proceeded with formal ceremony that honored both military protocol and Apache custom. Each signature represented commitment to revolutionary approach to intertribal relations that prioritized mutual benefit over zero-sum competition for limited resources. The Buffalo document would be preserved in both Apache oral tradition and official military records, serving as evidence that strength could be measured by the ability to transform enemies into allies rather than simply defeating them through superior force. The memorial stone circle rose from the mountain meadow like ancient prayers made visible, each carefully placed boulder representing one aspect of the transformation that had touched every member of their Apache community during the years since AIYANA's desperate plea had awakened revolutionary understanding of what it truly meant to be strong. The stones themselves had been gathered from sacred places throughout their territory, carried by volunteers who understood they were creating something that would guide future generations long after the original participants had joined their ancestors. Nahali stood at the circle's center holding his newborn son, Little Healer, whose tiny fists grasped at autumn air with the same determination his father had once brought to warfare, but now directed toward nurturing life rather than ending it. The child's Apache name had been chosen by the tribal council to honor the healing arts that had become as valued as traditional warrior skills in their evolving culture. Each stone tells part of our story, Nahali explained to the gathered community, his deep voice carrying easily across faces that reflected profound changes in understanding that had occurred through patient teaching rather than forceful conversion. This one represents the darkness of illness that brought us together. That one symbolizes the light of healing that emerged from choosing gentleness over violence. AIYANA sat on soft buffalo robes nearby, her body still recovering from childbirth, but her spirit radiant with joy at witnessing their son's introduction to the community that would shape his understanding of Apache identity. Her own transformation from desperate daughter to confident healer had become an integral part of the story the memorial stones would preserve for future contemplation. Chief Iron Hawk stepped forward carrying the eagle feather staff that had witnessed every major decision during their community's evolution, its ancient authority now enhanced, rather than diminished by the revolutionary changes that had occurred under his leadership. His weathered face showed satisfaction with developments that had strengthened their tribe's essential identity, while expanding their understanding of how strength could serve tribal welfare. This memorial will remind our children's children that true power lies not in the ability to destroy what we fear, but in the courage to nurture what we love, he declared, his voice carrying the weight of 15 years spent making decisions that affected every tribal member's future. The giant showed us that the strongest warriors are those who understand when to fight and when to heal. Grandmother Willow, now 85 and moving more slowly but still sharp in mind and spirit, approached the central stone that bore carvings depicting the integration of traditional Apache symbols with new representations of healing arts. Her arthritic fingers traced patterns that told stories of transformation through images that transcended the limitations of spoken language. My great-granddaughter will learn from these stones that strength takes many forms, she said, gesturing toward little Dancing Bird's infant daughter, who slept peacefully in her mother's arms, despite the ceremony taking place around her. She will understand that warriors protect their people through wisdom as well as weapons. The memorial's completion had drawn visitors from neighboring tribes who came to witness physical evidence of changes that had transformed Apache understanding of leadership and community service. Chief Running Bear from the eastern mountains had traveled 4 days to see for himself the stone circle that represented revolutionary approaches to tribal governance and warrior training. These stones will outlast all of us, Running Bear observed, with the respect due to innovations that strengthened indigenous identity rather than weakening it through accommodation to outside pressure. Future generations will read in them the story of how one tribe learned to grow stronger by embracing gentleness alongside traditional courage. As sunset painted the memorial stones with golden light, the assembled community began the closing ceremonies that would dedicate their monument to the memory of transformation achieved through individual courage and collective wisdom. Sacred herbs burned in clay bowls placed between the boulders, their smoke carrying prayers of gratitude for lessons learned and changes that had enriched rather than diminished their essential Apache nature. Little Wolf, now 9 and showing remarkable progress in both traditional skills and healing arts, placed the final offering at the memorial's heart, a small bundle containing practice arrows and medicinal herbs that symbolized the integrated education he and his generation had received. His gesture represented hope that the stone circle would inspire future young people to embrace complete understanding of Apache strength. The memorial stood silent and eternal against the darkening sky, its stones bearing witness to the truth that communities could evolve without losing their souls, that tradition could be honored through transformation rather than rigid preservation, that the strongest leaders were often those who possessed courage to change what needed changing while protecting what deserved protection. Tomorrow would bring new challenges requiring both ancient wisdom and innovative solutions. But the stone circle would remain as permanent testimony to the year when one Apache tribe learned that true strength lay in the marriage of warrior courage with healer's compassion.